Week 4, mighty enjoyable across college football. Exciting, unpredictable to a certain extent. And now we look ahead to week 5 and appreciate all of you being here at the Voice of College Football on a Thursday night with 3 games in the group of 5 tonight and some matchups that will actually figure into the conference race in both the Pac-12 and the ACC coming up on Friday night. How about that? So we have left the link there in the chat. Please join us on the line, and we'll talk college football. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. All right. There's been a lot stated about the unpredictability of this college football season, that this is a crazy, wacky, unpredictable, totally zany college football season. Is that the truth? Or is that just kind of the way it appears to be? I went through the Vegas lines for the first 5 weeks of college football, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of evidence, factual evidence, to it being a crazy college football season. I think it has been on the field, but it always is. There are always a lot of amazing finishes. There are always a lot of close, could be, should have been, might have been upsets. But the ones that really counted, the ones that actually transpired on the scoreboard, maybe not quite as many as we had thought. So let me run down some of the upsets thus far. These are all the upsets that involve Power 5 teams in the first 5 weeks of college football, including week 0. So in week 1, we had these upsets. Fresno State beat Purdue. Purdue was a 4-point favorite. No great shock to anyone, especially me, who predicted Fresno State would win the game. Colorado TCU, of course, that's the one that jumps out. That was the one that shook up a lot of people. We didn't know at that point how good Colorado would be or could be, or that TCU is pretty questionable, at least at this point. We have yet to see them play anybody else in the Power 5 as of yet. They've got West Virginia coming up this Saturday, and so there is your biggest point spread upset of the season right there in Fort Worth, week 1, Colorado over TCU, 21-point underdog. Boston College is horrible. They confirmed that once again. If you didn't think so, then they confirmed it once again for us on Saturday against Louisville, losing by 4 touchdowns. Boston College was an 8-point favorite against Northern Illinois, and they lost that game. Also in week 1, we had Wyoming over a Texas Tech squad that a lot of people liked as a chic under the radar, which, because it became so prevalent to pick them as an under the radar selection, became an over the radar selection. Texas Tech is a team that would contend for the Big 12 championship spot in the title game opposite Texas. Wyoming defeated Texas Tech as a 14-point dog. Florida State LSU, I don't consider this to be an upset, but by the Vegas line, technically it's an upset, as Florida State was a 2.5-point underdog to LSU and, of course, won that game. And then the most important upset of week 1 and possibly of this young college football season, Duke. And we're going to talk some more Duke football. Duke is giving us reason to talk Duke football for the first time in forever. Defeated Clemson. And, of course, the Tigers were a 12.5-point favorite. Those are the upsets in week 1. There were 6 upsets that involved Power 5 teams. Week 2, Miami beat Texas A&M. They were a 4-point dog. Not a huge surprise there. Cincinnati over Pitt, that surprised me to a certain extent. I thought Pitt was a much better team, and Pitt lost that game by 6 points, and they were a 7.5-point favorite. Texas and Bama, of course, in addition to the Duke-Clemson upset, this less of an upset, but still a touchdown underdog was Texas on the road, and Tuscaloosa, and of course, pulled off the win. Those are the lone 3 Power 5 upsets in week 2. In week 3, Mizzou over Kansas State on that 61-yard field goal as a 4-point underdog. Miami of Ohio defeated Cincinnati as a 14-point dog. Florida over Tennessee, another important upset right there, as a 5-point underdog at home. And BYU over Arkansas, the Cougars were an 8-point underdog against the Razorbacks. And then last week in week 4, you had West Virginia as a 6-point dog at home against Texas Tech, got the job done. Georgia Tech is a 3.5-point dog. Not really a substantial underdog right there. Once it gets past, it's got to get past 3 or 4 points for me to consider that team to be an underdog. But Georgia Tech was technically an underdog on the road against Wake. They won the game by 14. Wazoo over Oregon State. Again, just a field goal game, according to Vegas, and the Cougars won it. And then Northwestern with the biggest point spread upset of last weekend over Minnesota. Of course, they were down by 21 and won the game in overtime as an 11.5-point underdog. All right. One more time, welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. The link is in the description section of the video. The link is also in the chat. So please join us. Keep in mind when you shop on Amazon, which for those of you who don't, I apologize for harping on this, but for those of you who do, it's so easy to grab the Amazon link that we provide, use it, and it will be the same shopping experience that you already experience, and it doesn't cost you a penny. I am looking forward to this call to kick us off tonight. Yakov's here.
Yakov. Hi, Mark. Good. Thank you, Mark. I always enjoy your show, and I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm honored to take your call. And so Yakov called us earlier today at the Ohio State show, or did not call. He gave us a comment and a contribution. So Yakov, first of all, thank you for your contribution today.
Of course.
And then also you brought up the Cardiac Kids. And Yakov, I always enjoy how you are able to take the current game, the current matchup, whatever's going on, the storyline currently, and then tie it to the past. And so you made that relationship between Ohio State and their late game, last second drama and tied that to the Cleveland Browns of yesteryear. And some of you will remember the Cardiac Kids of Brian Sipe, Reggie Rucker, Dave Logan, Calvin Hill. Did I go on? Greg Pruitt, Mike Pruitt, etc. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Mark. I enjoy history in general. I love NFL history. I love college history. And yeah, that type of connection just comes to me. I know you made the comment there earlier when I super chatted that you were not seeing the connection between the iffy Browns, every game can go either way, and the Buckeyes. I guess I was referring more to the feeling of the heart palpitations of the Cardiac Kids than the overall comparison of the 1980 Browns and Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State's much better than the 1980 Browns, equivalent of.
Yes,
but yeah, Mark, I was having heart palpitations.
that I took that approach to it.
Yeah, Steve took it more as the actual Notre Dame game, how I felt or how many people felt compared to 40 some years ago than the overall thing. But I liked how you took it too, Mark. I'm happy you guys interpreted my somewhat vague super chat in different manners.
Yes, I enjoy your super chats again because I would definitely talk more about college football history, NFL history on here. If this was just a venture where it was just for my own, as they say, it's in giggles, that I was just doing that and just it really didn't matter what we had to talk about or how many people were watching. There would be more trips down memory lane.
Mark, if you and I'm ever so fortunate to get to meet you one-on-one or off YouTube, I'd love to delve into such topics.
Yeah, that would be a whole lot of fun, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Mark, as much as I'd love to keep talking about history, I might say something more about the current game.
Yes.
And I'd like to see what you think about this, Mark. Ohio State, Florida State, and Texas. I believe, first of all, Mark, do you think it would be fair to say, I know rankings don't matter now, but I think those three, if we throw out the preseason rankings, they should be somewhere, probably Texas number 1, Florida State 2, and Ohio State 3 based on season accomplishments. Do you think that would be a fair thing to say?
Well, I do rankings, Yakov.
And I saw your rankings. I think they were close to that.
They were somewhat close to that. I have Florida State number 1. I have Texas number 2, and I still believe Ohio State's around number 5, 6. I don't remember. I'd have to call them up.
Yeah, I can't remember now either. But I thought those three teams have the three best wins of the season. And
Yes.
I also like to give them credit for scheduling, which is where I'm going to go with this, Mark. I believe that all three of those teams, I think it's Florida State's the most likely to win their, I don't know. You know, they're going to win every game, in my opinion. But I think that all three of those teams have a get out of jail card free. And what I mean is, if one of them, if any of them happen to not win their conference, but only end up with one loss, I believe they should be greatly rewarded for taking playing LSU, playing Alabama, playing Notre Dame, teams such as Michigan, who played nobody out of conference. If they finish 11-1 and they do not win and they don't win the Big Ten East, to me they're out. I mean, unless there was all the other conference winners were three lost teams or so. But I believe that you should be rewarded for this, Mark. Kind of like a get out of jail free. You don't win your conference. If we can get you in, we're going to get you as an at-large team because we value what you did.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I will say that we're going to have to, or somebody's going to have to do something about college football scheduling, because as we get into this 12-team playoff, more and more it's becoming somewhat irrelevant as to who you play out of conference, as long as you win and there's no incentive to play difficult games. And again, I don't understand why these schools are able to schedule their own games. I don't get that.
Yeah, obviously you don't do that in the conference. The conference sets your home and away schedule, but you're right, Big Ten 3, and then the SEC 4 games, you can play wherever you want. Yeah, that's true.
I will also say this, Yakov. While I do believe that those are the three most difficult, or the three most impressive wins and most important wins thus far this season, and you could argue that Florida State defeating Clemson, you could argue that. But anyway, that those three are the biggest non-conference wins of the season. Look at a team like North Carolina. North Carolina has not scheduled one outstanding elite type program, but they have played out of conference South Carolina, Minnesota, and Appalachian State.
I think playing South Carolina, Minnesota is that's pretty decent. That's a nice schedule there.
I think they've played, and that's why I've got North Carolina ranked number 3 in the country, because I base it on the results on the field, that I believe that they've played a combination of they have played consistently the best schedule from week to week. So they played those three, and then they played Pitt. They have played no cupcakes, unlike everybody else in the country.
Right. Yeah. Mark, that's very true, Mark. One other thing I'll say about Ohio State is, I know you have a lot of callers, so I won't stay too long today, is that in 2016, when they beat Oklahoma, I think they got, I use the word get out of jail card free. If they would have played a MAC school that year and won by 40 points or so at home, they might not have made the playoffs as an at-large team. I know Penn State had 2 losses, so if you want to compare them as the 5th team, then they might have gotten anyway. Whereas in 2021, when they remember that, obviously, as you know, they lost to Oregon. If they would have played a MAC school that day instead and won, I don't think that year Ohio State was one of the 4 best teams, but I think they would have been in it over Cincinnati that year as an undefeated team. So again, that's what I don't know if I'm saying a question. I guess I'm just more making a statement right here, Mark. But in 2016, you beat Oklahoma, get out of jail free. You don't win the conference. In 2021, you play a tough school instead of a MAC school or so. You don't win the Big Ten East, and you have 2 losses and you're out. So I guess if you want to comment on that, that's fine. But I guess I'm just illustrating how playing a hard schedule could help you, and also how playing an easy, if you win, and how playing an easy schedule could help you if you win that, and how playing a tough team like Oregon could hurt you if you don't win. So, I guess it just goes back to your point there, Mark, that this uneven scheduling brings difficult comparisons between 2 programs.
Yakov, I think the lesson learned is that if you schedule that kind of game, you better, number one, win it. And if you don't win it, then you better lose it close and then
Right.
hope that that team goes on to have an outstanding season.
If Notre Dame finishes 11-1, Mark, I actually I tried to call John Kennedy about this. I couldn't get through to his show, but if let's say last year, Mark, if Notre Dame goes 11-1, first of all, if Ohio State loses only one game this year, that'll be great if that's their only if they have Notre Dame in their back pocket. But just switching to Notre Dame for a second, last year they were the Pac-12 winner had 2 losses. The ACC winner had 2 losses. That would be Clemson, and the Big 12 winner had 3 losses. Although the loser of the Big 12 title game was Texas, TCU, who had no losses at that time. But I'm just saying, as far as I know, I'm jumping all the way to Notre Dame here, but yes, it'll help Ohio State. But also, they're very much in it. If they finish 11-1 and there's two-loss Power 5 champions, they could very much be in the number 4 seed.
Yeah, they have not played themselves out of it. They do have the they have the limitation of not playing in a conference championship game.
That's true.
And
right.
I don't know how much that is held against them, but we have not seen them. Well, we have seen them one time lose one game and be left out of the playoff, but that seemed to have been a very easy comparison to make when they lost to Cincinnati in 21, and that was the comparison to be made. So, but other than that, we've not seen them only lose one game. We've only seen, correct me if I'm wrong, as I run through these years, I believe that there's only been 3 teams that have won a conference championship, lost one game, and missed the playoffs. And that would have been TCU and Baylor in 2014. And that would have been Ohio State in 2018.
That's right. Yeah. I saw that year, Mark, play a close game at Purdue, and they may have been in, but they got blown out within 2018. Yeah. I know maybe Oklahoma still would have made it, but and Mark, I'll leave you as the last thought. I love to talk about yesteryear. With big pads, with big shoulder pads, Chip Trianum could very well be Kevin Mack. See, I looked them up. They're almost the exact same weight, same height. More of a power back, but still has some good speed. So I was talking about the cardiac kids earlier, and I'll refer back to one of my favorite running backs in 1980s, Kevin Mack. Similar build, similar style.
What is the first football season that you remember in the NFL?
That I really followed would have been now again, I remember bits and pieces. I remember my dad and my uncle lying down on the couch watching the Eagles and Oakland in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say the 1982, I definitely remember Cincinnati being good that year, watching multiple games that year. So probably around 1982 when I really watched. But I remember bits and pieces from so what, I'm gonna say 1980. Because I remember a little bit. I remember I remember obviously the Browns losing that game against Oakland, and I remember the Super Bowl, and I remember the general idea of the cardiac kids, hearing all about it in Canton, even though I wasn't yet ready to, I was 6 years old, I wasn't yet ready to sit down and watch complete games. So let's say 1980.
Okay. Because as soon as you started to talk about when your football fandom started, and then I was trying to make the connection to the cardiac kids, because to me, the cardiac kids were in 1980 generally. That may have started up in 1979 because they played similar games like that and then carried on a little bit after that. But I don't remember that. I don't know if people brought that back to those 86, 87 teams. I think of that as the dog pound.
The dog pound, yeah. And Mark, the first college game I remember watching would have been the Sugar Bowl, the 1981-80 season with Georgia and Notre Dame. I remember, as I said, every New Year's Day, we'd go to my grandparents' home. They lived just a couple miles down the street in Canton. Go to their basement. My grandmother loved football, and we'd bang out every single game. And I remember watching the Georgia Notre Dame game and heard my grandma saying, "See that young boy out there? He is he was a freshman. He's the best running back in the game. He didn't actually have a great game. I don't remember that, but I looked it up. But yeah, Georgia Notre Dame. I remember that game. That's my first real college game I paid attention to.
Yeah, I do remember that well. I also was wondering at that point, why is Georgia playing Notre Dame? Notre Dame's lost. They've
Yeah,
tied a game. Why are they playing in the Sugar Bowl against this team that's trying to win the national championship?
yeah, that was. I remember trying a couple years ago. I was trying to tell my nephew, who now loves college football, that they voted on the national champion, and some of you didn't know until a day or two later who was the champion, and he was confused by that concept.
He should be confused by that.
Mark, thank you again. I'm going to listen to the rest of the show.
Thank you, Yakov.
Have a good evening.
Great to hear from you.
Sure.
Our guy Jackson, look at that. We appreciate Jackson being here, touting our offerings here at the Voice of College Football. Yes, exclusive live streams, watch parties, predictions, betting advice, insider looks, all either on Patreon. We make this easy for you on Patreon /MarkRogersTV, or you can just be a YouTube member right here. You get the same benefits. So we will provide the predictions. I went 15-5 last weekend against the spread, 15-5 against the spread. Let's see, I'm around 63% for the season against the spread. We will try to hold up that lofty standard, and 17-4 against the money line. I pick all the top 25 games, and then I add a few other ones that I like. And then we also get the predictions from some of our media contributors that you see here at the Voice of College Football. So whomever I can get that will fill out the sheet. It's been rather difficult. This may be the last year we do that. I don't know. You guys are going to have to give us feedback on how much you guys enjoy the picks from the likes of Steve Hellwagon, Tony Gerdeman, Steve Dace, Corey Brada, about 10 or 15 of those guys, because sometimes it's tough to chase those guys down and get predictions. It's primarily a pain in the rear end is what it is. But those guys are great, and I wanted to include them. So this is about the third season we've done that. But man, the crown jewel is Steve Merrill from Wager Talk. And we just produced some segments this afternoon that are starting to be released on the various team channels with Steve Merrill, who is (16-1 against the spread. He's 16-1 against the spread. Now, that goes back to the first week of 2022. He gives us one exclusive prediction, one selection against the spread, under the radar selection, exclusive to the Voice of College Football. And we post that on Patreon, and you also get it, as Jackson has stated here, as a YouTube member. And he's 3-0 this season. And it's usually an under the radar kind of game, but boy, he can pick the winners. All right, man, I would think, my goodness, I know that there are dudes out there that are raking in $1,500 to $2,000 for memberships on their betting sites, because I've had friends that have actually coughed up that kind of money to go on these betting sites and get that type of advice. Now, I know we only supply one game per week, but still 16-1 against the spread for $5 a month. And then you get my picks, which I'm not going to guarantee anything. I'm not an odds maker. I'm not a handicapper, but I do a pretty good job picking football games. Typically, usually do. Again, 63% against the spread this year, and probably my goal is to hit 60% against the spread every year and 80% straight up. All right, welcome into the Voice of College Football. Our guy Michael is on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening, sir?
I am doing splendid, Michael. How are you?
Pretty good. I wish we could just bottle this day. It's so beautiful out here, man.
It's not beautiful here. You must be in the beautiful state of Indiana.
Why, is it raining there in Ohio right now?
It is today, yes.
Yeah, we got all that stuff yesterday. Hey, speaking of the Browns, man, I remember them back with Ozzie Newsome, Brian Sipe in the early 80s. But I'm trying to remember, who was their running back back then and the other receivers?
Well, the first iteration of the Browns in the 80s, the early 80s, 1979, 80, they had Dave Logan, number 85 at wide receiver, and Reggie Rucker, 33. Ricky Feature was a wide receiver, but the two main guys were Logan and Rucker. Those are the two guys that played with Ozzie Newsome at tight end, and their running backs were Mike Pruitt and Greg Pruitt were the big backs, but they had guys like Larry Poole and Calvin Hill and and
Yeah, okay.
Herm Fontenot. And then the later, as we progressed through the 80s, the next big surge of
Ernest Miner.
yes, decent Cleveland teams that went to 3 consecutive AFC championship games. Kevin Mack, Ernest Biner were the 2 main backs.
The thing I'm trying to figure out is, was Mike and Greg brothers?
No, they were not brothers.
I was wondering, because I know they had the same name and stuff like that. Now I was
Do
wondering,
you know where Mike Pruitt? Do you know where Mike Pruitt went to college?
He's a Boilermaker.
Thank you. Excellent. Great job, Michael.
Yep, and then they also have Mike Phipps there in Cleveland too for a while.
Mike Phipps, yeah, he was drafted by the Browns, 1975.
Yep, because I think he was at 75. I thought it was there back in the 60s.
Yeah, that's a little bit late. More like 72.
Yeah, because Gary Danielson took over him.
Yes. Okay.
When he stuff like that. But no, I was just wondering stuff like that. But no, I was wondering stuff like that. Wonder what Brian Sipe's doing these days.
Brian Sipe of San Diego State. I don't know what he's doing these days. I know that he was a big surfer kind of guy that lived out in Southern California.
I thought he was doing some kind of coaching, wasn't he?
Yes, he did go into coaching, and he was on the staff at San Diego State at one point, but that was a long time ago. Like, he finished up his NFL career and then went to the New Jersey Generals in the mid-'80s, but only played for with Herschel Walker and those guys for a year or 2. But, you know, I was on the line with somebody here recently that brought up great quarterbacking schools, and I told them that Purdue has an argument as the greatest quarterback school in the history of college football, and they didn't believe me.
Wow. I wonder where that person been his life. But no,
well, I had to run down the names for them.
I know this is college football, but I'm going to ask you just about Cleveland. What's out as good as it was? I wonder why they never got to a Super Bowl back in the 70s and 80s when Brian Sipe was there.
Because they weren't good enough.
I mean, they made trips to playoffs every year. It seemed like they didn't get over the hump or something.
No, they did not go to the playoffs every year. They were in the playoffs in 1972. They actually, folks may not know this, that was the year of the great undefeated Miami Dolphins team that went 17-0. The Browns led them in the fourth quarter, had them on the ropes in a playoff game. But the Browns did not go to the playoffs between 1972 and 1980, and they went in 80. Then they didn't go to the playoffs. They went the strike season in 82, but then they didn't get to the playoffs until 86.
When Ferentz was the quarterback then.
Yes, then they were a bit of a. I'm sorry. Back up. 1985, with oh Lord.
Kosar.
No, well, Kosar was starting quarterback, yes, but they kind of eased him in as a rookie in 1985. And why am I drawing a blank? It wasn't Don Strock. It was the Arizona State quarterback. Oh my goodness, Mike Pegel.
Yeah,
anyway,
who's with the Colts?
Yes, with the Colts.
They got Indianapolis.
Nice job. Yeah, he was with the Colts, and they lost a playoff game that they led Dan Marino 21-3 in 85. But then, yes, Marty Schottenheimer, that was his first year, and that was their serious playoff run of years 85, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I thought they made the playoffs a couple times in the early 80s, but I was a kid back then too.
80 and 82.
All right. Excuse me. The only thing I'm trying to figure out is, has it ever happened in the seasons where a team never won a game at home but ran the table on the road in college football?
Oh, in college football?
Yes.
Then they would have gone like 6-6 or 5-6 or 6-5 back in the 11-game days.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine. I don't have knowledge of that. I don't know. I doubt it.
Now I was just wondering stuff like that because with Purdue, and I'm surprised that they're 0-3 at Ross 80. I figured they would have got a win by now. But it is what it is. When you can't close out football games, you're going to lose more than you can win. But no, one thing I'm trying to figure out is, do you think, even though I think Colorado will get beat by 14-17, do you think it might be a closer game to that, or is that what you're thinking also?
Colorado strikes me as the kind of team that, and I said this before the Oregon game, that I expect that when they're playing the top teams in the Pac-12, that there's going to be one or two times this year where they are going to seriously scare, or pull off an upset against somebody the likes of USC or Oregon. But there are also going to be two or three times when they just don't have it that day and they get annihilated like they did against Oregon. But I think that they're generally going to lose these games by 20 points.
So you're thinking along the line that they'll end up losing by about 14 to 17 Saturday night in Boulder?
If I was going to go either way on that, I would go north of 14 to 17.
All right. No, I was wondering stuff like that. Now, do you think Alabama could get a complete game against Mississippi State Saturday night also, or do you think that might be an iffy game for them too?
Oh, I think that they're continuing to improve and they're getting an idea of what they need to do with Jalen Milroe, and I expect them to play a pretty solid game and win by 15 to 20 points.
All right, now what about Georgia and Auburn?
I was a bit surprised. We posted a segment with our guy Steve Merrill a few minutes ago on our SEC channel that everyone should subscribe to. But his math models have Auburn playing a much closer game against Georgia than I could imagine. I just don't see where Auburn's going to be able to score against Georgia.
That's what I'm thinking too, but we should see. So, what's on the menu for this weekend, food-wise?
Oh, what's on the menu? Well,
yeah.
First and foremost would be what's going to be on the menu after I get done here, because I haven't eaten one thing today and I am starved.
Mark, that's not good
on the menu. Michael, my constant fight is living off of pizza and Raising Cane's and Chick-fil-A and places like that versus
nothing wrong with Raising Cane's and box. Nothing wrong with Raising Cane's. And no, I think we also pitching.
Oh, from a flavor,
cater you at dinner sometime.
From a flavor standpoint, there's nothing wrong with it, but
yeah. But no, I think we also pitch in and cater you at dinner sometime.
Well, that's very kind of you, Michael.
Yep. One last thing before I let you go, on the YouTube memberships and stuff like that, if you start at 1, can you upgrade before the 30 days is over with? Or do you have to wait till the 30 days is over with?
We have basically been providing everything for everyone, so I wouldn't be concerned with that.
No, because I mean, I'm going to do that, but I'm thinking before the 30 days is over, can I upgrade or am I stuck at the membership level I signed up at?
I believe you can upgrade at any point, but I cannot answer that for sure.
All right, and hopefully Purdue breaks this night Saturday afternoon and keeps the Cannon in West Lafayette.
Yeah, I think that game's a bit of a toss-up.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, Mark. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
See ya. Bye.
Our guy Michael Hogue stopping by, as well as DeReal MVP. DeReal, what's going on?
Hey, Mark. How you doing this evening?
I am doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is one of my favorite weeks for Kentucky football recently. Florida versus Kentucky, Mark. This has been a great series as of recently. Should be a great game. Kentucky's favored opened at 2.5. I think it's down to 1.5. I think Kentucky's got the better quarterback, the more proven head coach, and it's at home. All things that says Kentucky should win. But anytime I point that out, the Florida man always says, but who have they played? I understand that quarter. Who have they played, though? They've only played Akron. They haven't played nobody. So what do you think about that, Mark?
Well, I think you're correct on your 3 points on the Kentucky side, but I also think that, yes, while you haven't played anyone, this is nothing new. This is nothing new that Kentucky plays 2 or 3 cream puffs, enters the SEC season, and is able to adjust their game to play with whomever's in front of them to start the SEC season, which is a lot of the times, as you well know, Florida. They play Florida almost always early in the season. So here we are against Florida. So I wouldn't let that be a concern.
Yeah. Did you know there's been reports out there that Kentucky literally chose Devin Leary over Graham Mertz?
I did not know that. Did not hear that.
Yeah, from what I heard from the local like KSR people and stuff like that, the Lexington Herald, I think's got an article on it as well. They were literally KSR had a graphic of Graham Mertz being the next guy at Kentucky, but Devin Leary entered the transfer portal, and I mean, I have eyes, Mark. I'm sure you have eyes that works, and it's not hard to understand why people wanted Devin Leary over Graham Mertz.
But is Devin Leary playing better football right now than Graham Mertz?
Well, that's the question, Mark. I mean, he's got 5 turnovers, picks, but he's thrown 9 touchdown passes. But I mean, if you look at the explosive play metric, I think that's where Kentucky's going to shine. Because Florida
metric against who though? Florida's see, these are 2 teams coming together that have very different. If we are looking at statistics to tell us where to go on this, we've got Florida, one of the few teams in the nation that's played 2 quality teams, and Kentucky, who's played no one.
I understand they've played nobody, but against the nobodies, they've done what they should do. They're 3-1 against the spread. They've won every game by double digits. I mean, when you play bad competition, quote unquote bad competition, or quote unquote inferior competition, all you can do is blow them out. It's not like they're squeaking by these games.
I wouldn't say that they're necessarily blowing these teams out.
What's 35-3?
Yeah, they beat Vanderbilt last week. That was a fairly competitive game in the second half, was it not? And against who was it? Was it Eastern Kentucky that they beat by 11?
Yeah. Eastern Kentucky has always given Kentucky voodoos. It doesn't make sense, Mark. I understand. And if you want to notch that against Kentucky, I completely understand that. Kentucky beat Ball State by 30. The final score in the Vanderbilt game was 45-28. Vanderbilt literally scored a touchdown with 30 seconds left in the game, Mark. So, I mean, it was the closest it was 24-13 at the half, 11-point game. So, it was never a one-possession game in the second half.
Okay. I don't know whether I consider leading Vandy 24-13 at halftime a blowout.
Well, at the end of the game, it was a blowout. It was somewhat competitive, but then it turned into a blowout. I mean, what do you want them to do? Be leading 45-0 every single game?
Playing Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, and Akron. Yeah, they should be winning those games by 40 points. But I know it's Kentucky, and I know that they've done this in the past and still had, in the end, really good teams, and they've just kind of, just kind of methodically moved their way past some of these kind of games.
Right. I mean, no offense to Mark Stoops, but he's not that type of guy that's in the third and fourth quarter that's going to, try to run up the score on these inferior teams. He's happy to take the gas off, let the defense kind of go in the prevent mode, give up 5-10 yards of play. And I think that's what they were doing when it was 35-13, something like that in the third quarter. So
I'm going to ask you a question. You're certainly a student of the game, and I think there's a thought out there that this season has been just incredibly crazy, just crazy and unpredictable. And I've bought into that to a certain degree. But when I started to put together what games have been upsets this year, I'm really looking at a list of games that we could take any college football season and list the games that have been upsets through 4 weeks. And I would think most seasons we would have had more than the ones that I listed these off. I don't know if you had joined us off the top, but I ran down the upsets through the first 5 weeks of the first 4 weeks of the season. And there's only 3 or 4 games a week. And these are not monumental upsets. These are Fresno State beat Purdue, Miami beat Texas A&M, Missouri beat Kansas State kind of games.
Yeah, I don't know where the narrative's coming from.
I guess it's because Clemson lost the second game, and because I don't know other than that.
Alabama lost, so
and Alabama lost, but they lost to Texas. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm thinking maybe it's because the SEC is down, and it's been forever since the SEC down. Yeah. So maybe that's playing some side of a factor. And I heard Steve Dace in the Michigan podcast talk about it. I thought this was interesting. They only went it for like a minute or two. But do you think point spreads are affecting how upsets are viewed? And I'll give you an example. Missouri versus Kansas State. Okay? Kansas State was what, a 3.5 point favorite in that game? If we go back in time 20 years ago where point spreads were rarely talked about, and I just said, hey, the Big 12 champion is going to go into a 3-5 SEC team stadium and lose, I think people would consider that a fairly substantial upset. But because people only see it's 3.5 point spread, they're like,
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. I would also say that if nobody looked at the point spreads and we came on here and I just made up point spreads that were somewhat reasonable, I wonder how far I could go and people would still, and I'm not talking about people that have no interest in it, don't look at points, but I'm talking about, and I'm not talking about the Vegas handicapper either. I'm talking about people like you that know what the point spreads probably are, close to it. You know, you're not an expert at it, but you know, you look at it and you're familiar with it and strongly familiar. I wonder how, because you know, you just served up an example. I wonder how far I could go on either end of adding points to that before anyone would raise their eyebrows. Which frames, to your point, which frames the narrative and the perception of that game.
Right. And another example is the Georgia Bulldogs, okay? Georgia has failed to cover a game yet this season. Everybody's acting like Georgia, you know, maybe they've slipped back a bit. But, I mean, they're doing well besides the South Carolina game. I think Georgia's just going to be all right. But, you know, since they're not beating these teams by 40, 50 points, people are acting like what's going on with Georgia. Same thing with Michigan. They struggled against Bowling Green. They struggled, quote unquote, struggled against East Carolina. I mean, they're beating these teams by 30 points. What do you want them to do? And I think the point spread is just reshaped the way we think about what dominant teams should do to inferior teams.
Oh, I think it's a valid point. I think it's a good point. Something I'd never really considered because I've looked at point spreads since, I can remember when I was 10 or 12 years old, opening up the sports section, and they'd have on page 2, they'd have the point spreads of all the games. And this was every day. They'd have all the college basketball games, all the NBA games, the Major League Baseball. They'd have the odds in the newspaper on page number 2, Akron Beacon Journal, every day.
Right. And I just found it as an interesting and curious point, Mark, about the point spread situation. I'll throw out a point spread situation that somewhat surprises me. Clemson's only 6.5 point favorites this week on the road at Syracuse. I know Syracuse is 4-0, and you know they're a nice story, but Clemson's still the much better team, Mark. I mean, they're Clemson. They're more talented. They've got the better head coach. I know Clemson struggles at Syracuse, but they're in a do or die mode. If they fall to 2-3, then
you might be a bit surprised about some information that you will see later this week concerning that game then. Yes, Clemson's only a 6.5 point favorite. I did see 7, and then we recorded this afternoon, and it was at 6.5. And you know, Syracuse hasn't gone out. It's not like they've gone out there and proven themselves against somebody good, but they've taken on, you know, a couple like okay opponents, and they won the game. It wasn't that close against Army or against Purdue, but it wasn't a blowout. They won the games in the fourth quarter. But Syracuse historically has a nice run against Clemson.
I understand it. I just hate the spot that they're finding themselves in. If Clemson was 3-1, I can understand it. But if they lose this game, all hopes of them making the ACC championship game goes out the window. I don't see what this new format being going 5-3 being good enough to make it without divisions. So every game from now on is a literal must-win for Clemson.
Yes, and even at this point, they need either Florida State or Duke or North Carolina. Let's see who's all undefeated. Well, those are the teams that you would think would have the best chance of staying in front of them. Florida State, North Carolina, and Duke. They need two of those three, depending. They need, if it's Florida State or Duke, they need them to lose 3 games. If it's North Carolina, they need them to lose 2. Miami's another one. They need them to lose 2 because they'll play Miami. They need to win that game. Of course, they just need to win out. And so they've got a lot of teams. It's almost like when you look at the baseball standings and see that a team's in second place in the division and they're down by 7 games. Well, they are in a hole, but they only have to catch the leader. Whereas if you're 7 out and you're in 4th place, well, you got to jump all these other teams, and it's a different dynamic.
Right. The only team they're tied with is Boston College right now, Mark, and that's not great. And speaking of Boston College, Mark, game of the week in terms of if you want to figure out the worst team in the Power 5, Virginia goes on the road to Boston College, Mark.
We should do a watch party for that game.
Yeah, what analysis do you have of Virginia versus Boston College? I think Boston College is a 3-point favorite. I guess that's home field. I don't know if they have 3 points worth of home field advantage, but can Virginia get a win?
If they have 3 points of home field advantage, it's not because of the home field advantage. It's because of the travel. That would be the only advantage of being able to sleep in their own beds and have a nice, comfortable breakfast and get up and go to the stadium rather than traveling. It had nothing to do with the crowd, the environment, nothing. That place is going to be a mausoleum for that game between just 2 horrible teams. That said, Virginia had a really good chance to beat NC State last Friday night, and they had 3 unsportsmanlike penalties at the end of the game that pretty much cost them the game in a very odd run of situations in which they had that run of penalties. Virginia's a bad football team. And but again, they did almost pull off a game against NC State. So they're going to have their game or two where they have a shot at knocking somebody off. And Boston College at least showed us something against Florida State. But then they turn around and give up 56 points to Louisville. So, yeah, these are 2 awful teams, but one of them is going to be gifted with a win.
Right. And I want to talk about, I guess, what's the game of the week. Game day's going there. Notre Dame versus Duke. Notre Dame fans, they've been completely befuddled, beside themselves. Bush push part 2 happened, calamity of errors, If they lose this game to Duke, how bad could it get? Because they got to go to an undefeated Louisville team right now and then USC. I mean, they legitimately could be 4-4 if they lose to Duke, Mark.
I don't expect them to lose this game, but I am fascinated by this game. If I could only watch one game this week, this would be the game I would watch, even though it's really not the most important game of the week. I think it's got a certain cachet to it, a certain interest, because it's Notre Dame and because of this Duke story. And if Duke wins this game and goes to 5-0, then I don't know where other people are going to have them ranked, but my ranking is going to be awfully high. It is already. And I think Duke has a reasonable chance at winning this game. I think that they have an extremely good chance of winning this game. Unlike NC State a few weeks ago, I think Duke is a much better team than NC State, or a decidedly better team. And I don't think they're intimidated by Notre Dame. They've already done this against Clemson. They should be just brimming with confidence, as opposed to Notre Dame, which could be reeling a bit.
A bit might be underselling it. I mean, just the way they lost that game. I mean, this is going to be the hardest test maybe in Marcus Freeman's tenure as a football head coach. I mean, he lost to Marshall and Stanford last year, and he rallied troops, but this is a completely different challenge because they were there. And then it just all fell away. And it was because of him. It all fell away. And now everybody has to rely on Freeman to get it back, which is interesting to me, Mark, that the guy that failed them is the guy they need for them to succeed.
Yeah, failed them 2 consecutive plays.
Right.
With,
and that's
10 guys on the field.
Exactly. Unacceptable, Mark. That's all I got for you this evening. I would like to give a special fight on to the most popular NFL fan in the entire world right now, Taylor Swift.
Yes, she is. And your Kansas City Chiefs. DeReal recently has been putting a nice little twist on the close. Nice little twist on the close. And relating it to some hot topic in the football world. And yes, I didn't know about the relationship between Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce until football on, when was that? When did they play? Was that Sunday? Was that a Sunday game? I know that I had the game on, whoever the Chiefs were playing. See, I don't even remember because I wasn't like intently watching the Chiefs, and thought they were playing a bad team. Oh, they were playing the Bears, right? Maybe I wasn't watching the game. I had the Red Zone channel on probably. Anyway, yeah, they were fixated on showing Taylor Swift, which I get it. It's an entertainment business. You want to lure in the audience and you want to keep the audience as long as possible. And there are people that watch NFL games just to kind of casually drift by them. And if you can throw something up there that's more of a mainstream, this used to happen at ESPN all the time. It used to happen there all the time. And they actually stated that to us for a few years, that we are going to do everything possible to bring in the non-sports fan. And then you saw that focus, that purpose in doing that. And this, I'm talking about like 15 years ago. And what you saw it immediately. They were bringing all sorts of celebrities in the booth. Craziness. All right. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. Before we take our next call, the Amazon link's in the description section. You know that. So put it somewhere where you will not forget it. The Amazon link helps us build the channel, grow the channel, and it is transparent to you in every possible way. Ticket Smarter. We will post that information here, but Ticket Smarter is your secondary market with the best prices, and you can use a code that we provide, BIG, BIG, for $10 off, or BIG20 for $20 off. That's at Ticket Smarter. We got previews that we're releasing here at the Voice of College Football. We got Georgia, Auburn, Kentucky, Florida, and look out for a preview coming tonight, USC and Colorado. I have taken all these notes on how bad the Big Ten Western Division is. And that division gets crapped on every year about how horrible it is. And people are right. And I've always defended the Big Ten Western Division to a certain extent. But you know what? For as bad as it's been, it's worse now than it's ever been. And I will detail that upcoming. I also have 2 podcasts I've got to do tonight. My goodness. All right. Welcome in the Voice of College Football. We've got Buckeye Mike on the line.
How you doing tonight, Mark?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Well, I know there are some key matchups this weekend, but for the most part, I think this is kind of one of the lackluster weeks. And no, I do not say that because Ohio State is on a bye week. I am not that gullible. But I do think there are, like I said, a few interesting games. As far as like tomorrow's games, I think Louisville will squeak it out. I think that'll be a close one. One that I will try to keep an eye on too as well is Princeton, Columbia. I think Princeton gets away with that one. Utah, I would say this is probably what we expect out of Utah. this year will probably be the lower scoring, closer games. I think Utah beats Oregon State.
Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
could you back up one game, please? What
Yeah.
game did you review there? The Princeton who?
Princeton, Columbia.
Princeton, Columbia. Okay.
Yeah. So I had Louisville 23-20, Princeton 20-10, and Utah 17-10.
Are you going to be watching that game, or is there a reason that you're intrigued with the Princeton Columbia game?
I was just intrigued to the point that it was on a Friday night. I might glance at ESPN.com or something, keep track of that, but just interesting for a game like that to be on a Friday night.
Okay.
I think Kentucky will beat Florida, but I think that one will be a close one. 24-21. I've got the Wildcats. Syracuse, they're obviously, like we've said, playing at home, undefeated, and this is a dire need for Clemson to win this game in a sense. But I think Syracuse will pull it off. 34-24. USC, Colorado, I think it depends on what USC shows up. Because if last week's USC shows up, I think, I'm going to sound crazy saying this, but I think Colorado has a fighting chance. But I have USC winning 45-38. Obviously, that would be a bigger margin if the normal USC shows up and not last week. And ODU Marshall, I hope to see more out of Cam Fancher, and hope that Rashid Ali continues the stellar year that he's had so far. I have Marshall winning that one 35-14. The last game I want to talk about tonight is Indiana, Maryland. I think even though Indiana hasn't looked very good this year, we're seeing slight improvement, and I think that just for the heck of it, I think Indiana could pull off the upset. I've got them winning 33-28.
That would be quite the upset right there. The way Maryland's playing and the way Indiana has played in recent weeks, to see that, I would not be, Maryland has not arrived as a football program where they can look past anyone. But Indiana, that would be a win that Tom Allen would need desperately. That would be a great thing for him to try to keep his job. But where are they playing that game? Indiana?
Maryland, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, I don't really see it, but crazier things have happened.
Yeah. I know there's a few games tonight, but I kind of overlooked them because I didn't think that they were too big. I mean, I think tonight is more focused on the next league, so to speak, the NFL. I think that's where most of the eyes will be pulled for tonight.
Well, anytime there's an NFL game, that's where the eyes are pulled.
And it was Chiefs Bears. So yes, it was a crappy team. But so what do you? I mean, there's obviously proof there for the narrative, but what do you think? What do you make of this narrative that more or less Ohio State quarterbacks peak in college? Because outside of CJ and I would argue Justin Fields, we haven't really had a quarterback to be successful in the next level.
Yeah, Justin Fields, I don't know that we would necessarily consider him to be successful, individually successful to a certain extent as a runner, for one thing. Who else did you throw out there to be successful?
CJ Stroud. I know he just started and everything, but he's looked pretty good so far.
Yeah, he's looked good so far, but basically no Ohio State quarterback ever has been what I consider successful in the NFL.
Oh, yeah.
Now, your question is whether that has to do with Ohio State. Well, you got to think to some degree it does. Although I think as soon as there's a coaching change and an offensive change, that just having the same jersey on doesn't. There's nothing magical about that. You can't look at the way Ohio State recruits and signs and develops quarterbacks today and relate that to 20 years ago. I don't think there's any correlation. That was Jim Tressel. That was a completely different offense, different system, different development, different coaching, all that than what's going on now. Well, for one thing, Ohio State hasn't necessarily until recent years had the type of quarterbacks who would succeed in the NFL. It's not like that they've in the past recruited and signed quarterbacks who were supposed to be that kind of player. For one thing, Art Schlechter before Justin Fields is probably the most highly touted quarterback coming out of high school that would be considered an NFL kind of player. I know some people might throw in Terrell Pryor, but he wasn't that kind of a quarterback. He was a more highly sought after player, or as highly sought after as arguably the number one player in the country coming out of high school. But I don't know that anybody looked at Terrell Pryor coming out of high school and thought future NFL quarterbacking great. So they haven't really recruited and signed that kind of player. It's not like they've had a long line of signing Bernie Kosar, Jim Kelly, Gino Torretta, Steve Walsh, and all those Miami quarterbacks, or, a long line of Washington quarterbacks or Stanford quarterbacks or USC quarterbacks that as soon as they stepped on campus, they were already considered, like, if they developed, that they would be NFL quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I know the narrative's there. And there's obviously proof that the narrative is pretty much right. But I think depending on how the upcoming QBs develop, I think that we could change the narrative around as a generality. Not just like, being recruited out of high school, he's pretty much pro ready. I think, we're having a stint of quarterbacks after Kyle where I think they could see success. And, I had someone tell me the other day that being a pro quarterback that came out of Ohio State is a curse, almost like how the winning the Heisman is a curse. It's like, it's just superstition.
Yeah, well, I understand where that comment comes from because, yes, Ohio State quarterbacks have not been successful in the NFL. But who was supposed to be successful in the NFL? That's my question. Who before Dwayne Haskins, and even Dwayne Haskins a year prior to being drafted, was not talked about in that sort of way? And unfortunately, we will never find out about Dwayne Haskins, and may he rest in peace. I would say that Art Schlechter is the only quarterback that went into the NFL as a quarterback who was supposed to succeed in the NFL. Joe Germain was not highly drafted. Craig Krenzel, I don't believe, was drafted. Troy Smith
didn't last very long.
Was he even drafted? But I'm talking about what the expectation was when they were drafted. Like, it's not like you could say there's been this slew of first and second round draft picks at quarterback for Ohio State that have failed.
Right.
They haven't had those. They just started having those 4 or 5 years ago. So we'll see how that plays out with the current two guys that we can look to. But before that, they didn't have guys that were highly drafted. Nobody.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, I mean, it's obvious, and I guess I just don't like to pay attention to it because, I mean, at the end of the day, who really cares to a degree? But I mean,
Well, it sounds like you care.
I try not to, but I think
I'm
I
not
do.
saying that you shouldn't, but I'm just pointing out. I'm not trying to be that way. I'm just trying to point out that you obviously have called with this topic on your mind, and you've obviously had discussions with other people. So, um, yeah, I don't think, and I will speak as an Ohio State fan here, that we have to have or defend that we are the best in everything. Every school, every great football tradition has its sore spots. Everyone. So
Hmm.
you can't be the best at everything. You can't produce the best running backs, the best wide receivers, the best defensive backs, the best quarterbacks, win every national title, every you somebody can always poke fun at something.
Oh yeah.
So CJ Stroud and Justin Fields have the opportunity to start to change that narrative. Or if they have outstanding careers, I would think that that narrative would be completely changed and it would be okay, well, that's over. If we're sitting here in 5 years and they're two really productive quarterbacks in the NFL, then I would say, well, that is the way things used to be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I see your point, and that's pretty much all I got for tonight. Other than everybody make sure to comment, like, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to all the channels. Mark is awesome and does a lot of hard work for us. We should show him our appreciation by doing so. And use all the links, the Amazon link and the Ticket Smarter link.
I appreciate that, sir. Great call. I always appreciate your topics.
Thank you, Mark. Have a good one.
All right, man. Have a good night. Got a question coming in from Erica. It's good to see Erica here in the chat, which reminds me we've got an Iowa show that we deliver every Tuesday night at 4:30 Central Time. So I guess that's not night, is it? 5:30 for me. And when it gets dark early, like it's starting to now, it feels like 5 o'clock in the afternoon is night. 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central, every Tuesday with Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. I got to say, Corey and I, we enjoy doing that show and we look forward to it. And I think we put together a pretty good show. We bring on some great guests and we talk Iowa football and by extension, the Big Ten. Erica, thank you so much for the contribution. So nice of you. Do you think Kirk Ferentz should be relieved of his duties after this season? He refuses to make any changes, so I've pretty much lost my patience. All right. The only condition on that, I would say, Erica, would be in terms of what is the conclusion to this season. So the most important statistic for any football coach, and let's not be let's be realistic about it. I would want them to I would want them to be good leaders. I would want them to be good role models for the young men and all those things. So let's push those aside. Let's get down to business. The business is winning football games. That's why they're hired. That's why they make so much money. If they were there just to solely, be good role models for the young men and teach and instruct and help them to grow and mature, then we'd pay them what we would another college professor makes. But no, they're there to win games, pack the stadium, get good TV ratings, win the games. So if this offense continues to just be complete garbage, like it has been for 3 or 4 years, and really it hasn't been good for 15 years, but it's been mediocre, and now it's just deplorably bad. But as we talked about on the show the other night with Corey, they have such a bad schedule that they could navigate a 10-2 season with this offense. They could do that. And if that's the case, there is going to be no push outside of people like you, a few here and there, that there's going to be any kind of push to relieve Kirk Ferentz of his duties. If they go let's say this turns out to be the worst possible Iowa season, and realistically, and they go 7-5, that's probably about as bad as this team's going to do against the likes of Northwestern, Minnesota, Purdue, etc. They've already played the best team on their schedule out of the East. The other two games, Michigan State this week, and I forget the other one. I believe it's Michigan State, Penn State. It's one of the bad teams. It's Indiana or Rutgers. I think it's Rutgers. At the very worst, they're going to go 7-5. Well, what are you going to do with a 7-5 record? You've got a legend coaching this team, and we see coaches all over the place that have accomplished half of what he's accomplished, and they're given a pass on a bad season. And 7-5, by Iowa definitions, is not even a bad season. So Kirk Ferentz is going to decide his outcome. They're going to have to pile up a string of bad seasons. Like, I'm talking about two at the least and 3 most likely for there to be any heavy grumblings about dismissing him. It's going to take a lot more than one bad season. Because again, they're in a very unique situation where this defense and the special teams carries them to generally an 8-4 record, unlike any other program in the country, and they can completely be negligent offensively and get away with that. And he's been there for 23 years, and he can pretty much write his ticket for the rest of his career. And I believe he will. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if he sees USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon coming. We talked about this the other day. Think about this. Based on the way the schedule is going to be built, and we will find out a little bit more about that in the coming months, that you're going to play as any team in the conference, you're going to play 2 or 3 of those 4 on average every year. You're going to play 2 or 3 of them. Some years 2, some years 3. So the way I was playing football right now, and the way Washington, Oregon, USC, UCLA are playing, they're going to win 30 or 40% of those games. Maybe a little bit better, but those are going to tack on losses. Their records are going to decline. So I don't know if that matters to Kirk and whether he's going to want to have a really good season this year, meaning 9-3, go to the Big Ten championship game, lose by 20 points. That's a good season and move on. Or he's just going to continue on. I don't know. I don't know how to exactly answer that, except for he's positioned himself where he calls the shots and he's the guy, and nobody is going to show him the door at this point or at any future point without losing a lot before that. Golden Playbooks dropping by. Welcome to the Voice of College Football.
How's it going?
I am doing well. How are you?
Doing all right, I guess. It was a tough weekend,
Absolutely. That was a great game, and that was a tough loss for a team that you could argue played the better game.
Yes. Just needed one more guy on the field.
Yeah, that it's kind of tough to play winning football with 10 out there.
Yeah. But other than that, I think it was a pretty good game. Obviously, we got Duke this weekend. It's going to be pretty tough because Duke is a pretty good team. I think they're better than NC State.
Oh, I do too. Yep.
So they're definitely going to be a tough team. But yeah, other than that, there is some interesting games this weekend. Obviously, Utah and Oregon State tomorrow night.
I love that game.
Yes, I do too. And who do you got in that game? You think?
Well, I don't got anyone. I have not given it that kind of thought. Yeah, I would just be guessing at this point. I would just be throwing you a team just to throw you a team. Like they're playing at Oregon State. Okay, sure. Which I would guess that they are a very, very slim favorite because they're at home.
Yeah, I think I really like Utah a lot, but it's kind of hard to choose. Um, Now, what do you think about obviously Colorado and USC now? Do you think it's going to be a shutout? Do you think Colorado is going to get blown out again like they did Oregon, or just because I don't really think? I mean, USC is they're a good team. I just don't know what to expect from Colorado this week after that blowout loss. Um,
Well, USC's not shutting out anyone, let alone Colorado. So they're not going to throw up a goose egg now. And I know Oregon did for the first half and may have been able to do that for the entire game. So Colorado is going to be back at home. Sure, they're disappointed with what happened last year or last week, and that's a bit of a punch in the gut to their ego and maybe their confidence, but they're going to get lifted up by their head coach, and he's proven to be a pretty good psychologist. And they're also going to be lifted up by a home crowd that's going to be behind them to spur them on to bounce back. USC had all sorts of issues on defense last weekend, and this is going to be a good test to finally see if USC's defensive issues are real or whether they are just sleepwalking and playing a lot of players, which they are, and figuring things out. Because they're
yeah,
facing a real quarterback this week and a group of skill position players that can move.
yeah. Yeah, it'll definitely be pretty interesting to see how that goes. Um, then other games you got. Um, what's another one I'm excited for? Obviously, LSU and Ole Miss. That would be a pretty good one.
Yeah, that's a big game. LSU is just a slight favorite on the road, and they need to continue to win. They're looking toward that showdown with Alabama. And this is pretty much a last gasp for Ole Miss. They can't lose to both Alabama and LSU because then they lose the tiebreakers. Plus, they have 2 losses. So this is a must win for them.
Yeah. And do you think that Oregon can make the playoffs if they keep continuing to win? 'Cause they seem like a pretty good team. Like,
Well, they will make the playoffs if they continue to win because they'll have all wins. So they will be in the playoff. Now, I think this game against Colorado was a good sign that they were able to be that dominant on defense because say what you will about Colorado, they're a legit offense, not a complete offense. Their offensive line's iffy, questionable, not really that good. And their running game, therefore, is not that good. But they are still a legit offense. And to do what Oregon did against Colorado on the defensive side is extremely impressive. So, yeah, I think Oregon had really showed us something there. They went to Texas Tech, and even though Texas Tech's not an overly good team, that was still a gutsy comeback win in the fourth quarter there. Yeah, I think Oregon's a very good team that's got a shot to go to the playoffs.
if you had to choose, who do you really think is like the better team between Washington and Oregon? Because they seem.
Well, I think Washington looks, despite what we saw out of Oregon last week, Washington looks a little bit more impressive. Michael Penix is more of and I know that this generally doesn't count or matter, but he's a more gifted thrower of the ball than Bo Nix. That's a great comparison between those two teams. Those two teams are extremely evenly matched. Of course, they played a game right down to the wire last year and probably will again this year. There will be a ton of points scored when they play, most likely. And yeah, that's a tough one to handicap between those two, to name either one of them as being much better than the other. They're extremely comparable.
Because it's evenly matched.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today.
All right, Golden Playbook. Thanks for calling. We appreciate it.
Alrighty, thank you.
It's nice to hear from Golden Playbook, especially tonight, because I know there's been a little tension, a little animosity with the Notre Dame crowd here, and we appreciate and welcome all of you Notre Dame fans in here. Just because I stated a few things about the way just a few Notre Dame fans were acting during the offseason, but that's the case for every fan base. That is the case for every fan base. All right, let's see what you folks have in the chat. We don't have anyone on the line currently, and I am about 1,000 comments behind at this point. That is for sure. Corey says USC wins this one over Colorado 55-24. Uncle Rico, Arizona State is horrible and somehow had it within a touchdown halfway through the fourth quarter. And that's what's alarming. You can make excuses for USC, and maybe they were sleepwalking. Maybe they were trying some new things out. But the whole crazy things happen in the desert and all these mystical kind of, I don't believe in any of that garbage. That's not a difficult place to play. There were probably, 45,000 people there sitting on their hands. And yes, Arizona State was running them ragged all over the field. I was shocked, and I never used that. I wasn't shocked. I was surprised, mildly surprised, but I'm at this stage not even mildly surprised about anyone winning any game. But we were sitting right here after the late night games or the primetime games, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Penn State, Iowa, etc., doing our call-in show, and I popped on the USC game right here, not really rushing to get to it, thinking this is going to be a good game that I'd like to be able to watch while we're taking calls. 27-21. And this against a team, when you really sized it up going into the game, Arizona State had injuries all over the place. They had at some positions their best players, their second best player, gone. They were down to their fourth-string quarterback. I believe Jacob Conover played that game. That was the scouting report going into the game, is that they lost all three: Trent Bourget, Emory Jones, Drew Pine. Pine might have played that game. I think Pine did play the game. I want to check on this. So yes, Drew Pine did play for Arizona State. So they did play their, whatever you want to call him, third string quarterback. I said Emory Jones. I meant Emory Jones was there last year. Jaden Rashada. So Drew Pine, 21 of 36, 221, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. And then this Cameron Scadabo, the Arizona State running back, 111 yards rushing on 20 carries. USC had 49 points on the board against Stanford at halftime and was just completely crushing them. And based on Arizona State's issues, losing by 4 scores against Fresno State, getting shut out, all of that just pointed toward an epic blowout. So we will see this weekend, because Colorado can throw and catch. They can't do much more, but they can throw it and catch it. And they do have individuals. It's too bad, as Jason is telling us here, Cam Scatabo had a really good game, and USC didn't mean to bring their shoulder pads. Yes, didn't seem to. And that's been an issue with USC defenses in the past, and certainly last year's team. They're not real interested in tackling. And we saw that in the Tulane game. We saw that against Utah. The one thing I will say is it would have been awesome to see Travis Hunter out there against USC, because sure, USC's got so many weapons. He can only cover one guy. They can throw away from him, all those things. But Colorado does have a few players on defense, and he would have been example number 1A by far, that if USC gets a little careless, and for as bad as Colorado is in regards to size, they have size deficiencies, they have depth deficiencies, they have scheme, they have tackling deficiencies. I've seen quite a bit of Colorado football at this point this year. I watched every play of the TCU game. I watched the Colorado or the Nebraska game until it was no longer competitive. And then I pretty much watched the game sitting here taking your calls against Colorado State. So it's not like I had a real good feel for how the game was going, but obviously they were getting run around the field there and almost got upset that, man, if they had Travis Hunter in this game, in terms of just take one receiver out of the game, that would help that defense considerably. Plus, Colorado, for as suspect as they are on defense, they do have a few players that have the type of mindset and talent and explosiveness. And Travis Hunter, again, would have been at the top of this list to create havoc or force a turnover or two. USC is going to win this game 55-31, 52-28, something in that range would be my guess. But it might be still competitive and interesting at halftime. It could be 28-17 at half. Yes, LFG letting us know right there. This is what I was talking about. Arizona State down to their number 8 offensive lineman on the depth chart. Yes, Travis Hunter in that game would have been phenomenal. All right, here we go. Let's go to the week 5 schedule and let's set up our TV viewing. And you guys and other people, I say other people because I assume that all of you have subscribed here. I would hope so, that you're all subscribed here at the Voice of College Football. That I produced a few videos this week that most of the people watching these videos are not subscribed. Just saying, we could have so many more subscribers. Before we look at the games from this week, let us run down what we have available for all of you here at the Voice of College Football. And keep in mind, right now, the All In Clemson show is going on with Jordan Bowman and Tiger Paw Craven. So keep that in mind over on the Clemson show. So when we wrap up here, you can check out what they're doing over on the Clemson channel. All right. Before we get to the schedule available for your viewing pleasure, right now we've got Georgia-Auburn preview. We've got a Georgia guy and an Auburn guy breaking that down for us. We've got my ACC power rankings. Check those out. The Big Ten power rankings as well. We've got a nice little Florida-Kentucky preview as well. We've got our conference rankings. Pac-12 fans in particular, check those out. Then we got this nice little riff between Ryan Day and Lou Holtz. And what I should do, actually, because some people watched that video, is maybe do a response to that, because we did get, as of last check, well over 300 comments to that video. So we'll have to check that out and see what all of you had to say on that. And I will respond to, I'm sure people had sorted things to say about what I had to say about Ryan Day and Lou Holtz. And then, as you can see right here, what we typically do on Saturdays is we focus on a few games and provide some instant analysis. So there you see Michigan Rutgers last week, of course, Florida State Clemson. So I was watching two games at the same time at noon, and then delivered instant analysis on those two games. And then we did the Oregon Colorado game as well before we delivered our watch party. And then, of course, the late night call-in show as well. We really have not addressed the news that just came out on Wednesday concerning Mel Tucker, Michigan State, formally fired, because we pretty much covered that start to finish. Although now we turn our attention to a certain extent, if we want to, will Mel Tucker's suit against the university, does it fly? And more importantly for us football fans, who's the next Michigan State football coach? So we will address that in the coming weeks. All right, let's get to the schedule. Tonight, as we speak, at 7:36 Eastern Time, I know all of you are honed in on Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky. Middle Tennessee, of course, took Missouri to a 4-point game. They also got blasted by 7 touchdowns against Alabama. Western Kentucky, their big matchup in terms of a Power 5 team was against Ohio State, of course, a couple of weeks ago. Temple and Tulsa. Temple lost to Miami this past weekend, 41-7. Tulsa lost a couple of weekends ago. Back-to-back, poor Tulsa. The Golden Hurricane had to take on Washington and Oklahoma back-to-back. Jacksonville State and Sam Houston. The battle of the newbies to the Power 5. Jacksonville State, Sam Houston. Who is the best of the newbies entering the Power 5 or the FBS? Friday night, this is a good slate of games right here. You know, typically we don't even get one game like 3 of those. But we've got 3 decent games to watch and one really good game I'm anticipating. Louisville, NC State. Of course, the Cardinals are still 4-0, so they're looking for a 5-0 start under Jeff Brom. We told you all offseason, as we named Jeff Brom one of our best coaching hires, that was an upgrade, a significant upgrade from Scott Satterfield. Louisville and NC State. Brendan Armstrong pulled out the game against Virginia last weekend. May not be so lucky this time around. Utah, Oregon State. That is as good a Friday night game as we are going to see the entire season. So we are going to go live after Utah, Oregon State, unless it's a blowout. We'll come on early if it's a blowout and there's no reason to finish out watching the rest of the game. But Utah, Oregon State will be here live after the game. Louisiana Tech, UTEP, nobody cares. Cincinnati, BYU, it's kind of interesting, intrigues me as 2 new members to the Big 12. But I will solely be locked in on first Louisville, NC State. They kick off at 7, so we'll get a good 2 hours in before Utah and Oregon State. And then we will watch Cincinnati and BYU while we do the call-in show. All right, on Saturday, Penn State, Northwestern. Of course, the Nittany Lions coming off that demolition of Iowa. Northwestern with a surprising comeback win. If there was one team in college football in the Power 5 that we would select as being incapable of coming back from 21 points down, it would have been Northwestern. This is how improbable this Northwestern win was down 21. First of all, Northwestern sucks. Number two, they don't have that kind of offense to be able to come back. And number three, Minnesota's got a good defense, or so we thought. Ben Bryant threw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. And Bryce Curtis had 10 catches for 215 for Northwestern. So I'm glad to see Northwestern now with 2 wins on the season. Northwestern right now has a better record than Purdue. They have a better record than Indiana. They have a better record than who else out there? Probably some better teams than that. Probably some teams like Oklahoma State's 2-2. So they've got the same record as Oklahoma State and Clemson. And Mississippi State. So Northwestern at 2-2. This is a big victory for Ben Braun and Northwestern. USC, Colorado, that's a noon Eastern time game. Florida, Kentucky. So that's, and with Texas A&M, Arkansas, that's a heck of a window. And Clemson, Syracuse. Okay. This is what has shifted in terms of college football scheduling in recent years. The noon window, which I always loved, the noon window, has now become the best window of college football at noon. Look at those games. Okay, let's assume Penn State blows out Northwestern. They're a 25-point favorite. USC could do the same to Colorado, but let's give Colorado a shot. Florida, Kentucky is a heck of a game and an important game at this standpoint. Texas A&M, Arkansas, Clemson, Syracuse. Those are 4 games I want to see. I want to see all 4 of those games. I'm not going to be able to. I can only take on 2 at a time. So I'll probably watch USC, Colorado because of the narrative, the storyline, the shine on that game. I'll watch USC, Colorado, and Florida, Kentucky. And then once USC most likely has a nice lead in the third quarter against Colorado, I'll flip to Texas A&M, Arkansas. Now, I'll probably have 3 or 4 screens going, but I can only really watch 2 games. UAB and Tulane is not the worst game in the world on ESPN2. Then we've got a bunch of MAC kickoffs. And you know what? On ESPNU, if you love the group of 5, South Alabama and James Madison. If that was on a Thursday night, I'd watch that game. All right, so then we've got a bunch of ESPN Plus kind of games. And then the CW network brings us, how many people are going to watch this game? On the CW network, Virginia and Boston College against all those noon games. All right, then we've got the 3:30 window with Arizona State and Cal. Okay, here we go. Georgia, Auburn, Michigan, Nebraska, Kansas, Texas, which could be a good game. Indiana, Maryland, Illinois, Purdue. Yeah, these other games. Houston, Texas Tech. Baylor, UCF. Like, those games will be close, but those teams' seasons are already basically over from a championship standpoint. So at 3:30, just because of my audience, even though I think Texas and Kansas could be extremely entertaining, I will be watching Georgia, Auburn, and Michigan, Nebraska. I will have to watch those 2 games. And then if Michigan is doing to Nebraska what they were doing at this point last season, and they're winning by 30 points in the third quarter, then then we'll go to Texas, Kansas. Maryland or Illinois and Purdue are they're not very good football teams, but that could be 20-17. That could be a really good game. That just could be a good game, like a close game. I'm not talking about talent from a talent standpoint, good game, close game. Should be. Then we move into, let's see, 4 p.m. on the SEC network, Mizzou and Vandy, Boise State and Memphis, ESPN2. Not a bad little matchup. All right, then we get to the primetime window, LSU Ole Miss. That's on ESPN at 6 Eastern. Oregon, Stanford, yawner. Iowa State, Oklahoma, yawner. East Carolina, Rice, Abilene Christian, North Texas, et cetera, et cetera. You group of 5 fans, see anything of note there? Yeah, we've got 3 games in prime time. 3? Yeah, 3 games. Alabama, Mississippi State. No, we got 3 games. We've got LSU and Ole Miss. We've got Notre Dame Duke is going to be my primary game. And then I'll opt for LSU and Ole Miss over South Carolina and Tennessee. But if one of those games goes south, then I'm going South Carolina, Tennessee. Michigan State and Iowa is going to be a train wreck of a game. Iowa's a 12.5-point favorite. And the over-under on that game is 36. That means Vegas is projecting that game to go 24-12. Pitt, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, TCU. West Virginia, if they go to TCU as a 12-point dog and win that game, almost a 2-touchdown underdog that would move their record to 4-1 and 2-0 in the conference. San Diego State Air Force, they're on CBS Sportsnet at 8. Alabama, Mississippi State follows the LSU Ole Miss game. Washington, Arizona could be mildly interesting. But yes, my prime time window is going to be all about Notre Dame Duke, LSU, Ole Miss, and then South Carolina, Tennessee. And if it's 10-9 in the fourth quarter, I want to see who could possibly kick a field goal or block a punt or get a pick 6 between Iowa and Michigan State. I will do that. But my heartiest of apologies to you Iowa fans for having to watch that game. All right, folks. I believe we have done enough damage. The phone lines are clear. Nobody's calling. I'm just talking. I enjoy doing that because I will talk college football all the time. Appreciate you being here. Be on the lookout for our USC and Colorado preview. That's coming up. We released that tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern time. Also, see if I can find. Absolutely, I can. This is always worth a look. Check out the gear at the Voice of College Football. There it is. We will drop the link in the chat. You can get yourself a keychain. You can look at t-shirts. You can look at hoodies. We got a nice little mug there. The milkshake does not come with it, however. Sorry. We've got shorts. We've got all sorts of good stuff. We've got coasters. We've got cell phone holders. I keep telling myself, now that I've gotten my initial run of merch, so I got this jacket, the top 25 that actually makes sense. You could wear this proudly. And I got my red Voice of College Football jacket, and I've got a hoodie, and I've got a couple t-shirts and a polo. I want to see if we've got, I used to wear polos a lot. I used to dress a lot differently when I worked at the Worldwide Leader. Now I just sit around the house all day, and work, busting my tail to produce this channel. Of course I am. But I can do it in, t-shirts and shorts. I used to dress nice. I used to, believe it or not, I was a dresser. for work and otherwise. Let's see. Do we have? I'm going to have to get on Joey and see if he can get us a nice little polo, like a black one. I'd like a black polo. I'd like a white one too. And I guess we only have the 2 pages. Okay. Got a nice hat there. Look at Voice of College Football. You can go with the red. You can go with the black. Got the hoodie. Awesome stuff. Top 25 that actually makes sense, which I'm going to do my best to get out earlier. It's been coming out late night on Sunday the last couple of weeks, and because of that, I think less people have been partaking in the top 25 that actually makes sense. So we will do our best to not sleep on Saturday night. Uncle Rico is eyeing the shoes. Intense. Now that's a good look. That is a good look. All right, folks. Amazon link is in the description section of all the videos. Check that out. And again, look at all the content. We really want to get this Big 12 and SEC channels rolling. So if you go to the description section of this video or any video, it's right at the top, Big 12 channel, SEC channel. And even if you hate those conferences and hate every team in those conferences, if you want us to continue what we're doing here at the Voice of College Football, just understand how it all works together. And please subscribe, if you would, to the Big 12 and SEC channels. Otherwise, you will see me back here on Friday after the ball games, maybe before that, because I think we will go through the comments on the Ryan Day video, Lou Holtz fiasco, because a lot of people enjoyed that. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. I do have some things to say about the awful Big Ten West. My notes are right here somewhere, so be looking out for that video as well. Right here at the Voice of College Football, we are also simulcasting, not just on another channel, we are simulcasting on Twitter right now. We are going to make our presence felt on Twitter more so going forward, or whatever they call it now. We want to take some money away from Elon Musk. So we'll take some of his money. And thank you, Jackson. Jackson's all over it. Thank you for that. If for no other reason, to just pay off Jackson's work in dropping the link to the SEC channel and the Big 12 channel in the chat. And we truly do work on these channels. You will see tons of new content every day, whether those are live streams. We got a Big 12 show that you folks probably don't know about. So listen to this. We got a Big 12 show every Tuesday night with Clint Foster. He's fun. He's hilarious. Check him out, Clint Foster, on The Biggest 12 show, and that's on the Big 12 channel. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. Jackson, thank you for helping us out. Jason and others in the chat, and we will see you on Friday night and probably before then. So have that notifications bell on, and we'll see you next time.